Hello, good morning. My name is Adriano, and I'll be responsible for the lecture today. I sincerely hope, that I can bring some information to you, and that will be helpful and then it can broaden your self-consciential therapy and self-research, and your self-cognition. Okay. I would like to tell you that you can ask any questions you want. I'll try to answer them all. They will be put for me here in a private chat, and I'll be answering during the presentation. So you can ask anytime you want. Okay. So let's go to our lecture. Okay. What we are going to be speaking about intraconsciential recycling and self-consciential therapy. I could ask you if you see any relation in these two topics, and probably you say that you do. But I suspect that maybe you could expand, you can broaden that aspect even more. Okay, so let's go to it. Next slide, please. First of all, I would like to give you some warnings. The first of them is, OIC activities do not replace or eliminate potential medical or psychological needs. So if you have them, keep your psychological or medical needs, take care of them. We recommend, whenever it proves necessary, to seek out qualified health professionals for the specific attendance, accredited by official boards. Okay, we do not indicate someone nominally or something like that. Okay, we only, if we see that you need it, we tell you to look for it. Okay, next slide. This is the disbelief principle. You probably already know that, but I would say to you that the most important thing is to have your own experiences. Don't believe in anything I say here. If you think it has any logic, just maybe if it can help in some way, make a hypothesis about the subject, and try to take it to your own lab and make your self experiments. And if it contributes to your life in some way, to your evolution in some ways, then maybe it can be helpful. Okay, next slide. Another fundamental thing to say is that conscientiotherapy, it's a specialty of conscientiology. Okay, next. In conscientiotherapy, we're going to be talking, since it's a specialty of conscientiology, we're going to be talking, everything we talk here, we work here, is going to consider the consciential paradigm. And just to remind you of it, we're going to consider that we manifest ourselves in a multidimensional ways, or in many infinite dimensions, and that we exchange energy with people we encounter in our everyday lives, intraphysical conscience, or extraphysical consciousness, and we also interact with the places we go to, the things we think in our everyday life. Though all that energy, we are always changing energy with that, and that influences the way we feel, the way we act, the behaviors we have. Okay, and we have a set of vehicles too, not just the physical body, the soma. We have other vehicles like energetic and emotional and mental vehicles. So we're going to consider that in everything we are talking here today. We also that we have had and still going to have many lives, and that we are ruled by a bigger ethics, a cosmoethics, laws of the cosmos. Okay, that's mainly the consciential paradigm. Maybe in some way are going to be talking about it in later slides. Okay, next. Okay, what's consciential therapy? Consciential therapy is this specialty of conscientiology that studies the treatment, relief, and remission of consciential disturbances. So we studied the best treatments, the way to relieve and even generate remissions of disturbances through resources and techniques derived from addressing the entire consciousness. When you say entire, the whole holosoma, and we consider all the dimensions that you just talked about, the various lives. We consider all that, not just this life and this body and things like that. It's very broad. And it's pathology and parapathology and prophylaxis and paraprophylaxis. So we consider what you're feeling now, what's happening to you now, trying to help you relieve and treat that. And we also work on the prophylaxis of that, or what can I do not to get in this pathological, not to have disturbances. Okay, next. What's self-conscientiotherapy? Self-conscientiotherapy is the conscientiotherapy applied to itself, to ourselves. So self-conscientiotherapery is the self-application of conscientiological knowledge through conscientiotherapeutic methods and techniques that we study here. Aims at self-evolution by changing the personal holothen. Okay, next. This is just a resume of what I've just said. So the aim of self-conscientiotherapy is self-instrumentalization for consciousness. Okay, so the idea is for you to have all the techniques that you need to apply it to yourself. So application of conscientiotherapy, self-prescribed techniques. So you not only apply it to yourself and you use it. That's important. We're gonna I think the next slide is about the conscientiotherapic cycle. So we're gonna talk about how to do that in many aspects. So the consciousness is it's the therapist of themselves. Okay, this is the idea here. And here's the self-conscientiotherapy cycle. Let me talk about each one of these steps or phases in self-conscientiotherapy, okay? The first of them is self-investigation. The idea is that I have something that's bothering me, that's not or someone's complaining about something that a behavior I have, like an example could be that I'm usually sad or anxious, or I'm fighting with everybody. I'm manifesting too much anger, and that's bothering me. And I want to change that. So it's very important to have something to investigate. So this phase, what happens here is that we're going to gather the facts and the parafacts that happen to have material to work upon. Okay. The self-investigation phase is a phase where we do that. The self-diagnosis phase is a phase where I get all of this. Imagine this specific situation of someone that's always angry or impatient with things, and that he begins to write down in a diary or in some notebook all the facts that happen, all the things that happened when he was angry or impatient. After a time, he'll have many facts to look at, like 20, 40, or even more. So he probably will see that some things are the same, they repeat themselves. There is a mechanism there. So to this mechanism, that's the most important things that we are going to have as a product of this phase. We're going to have a mechanism that we work, that we manifest ourselves. And if it's probably going to be easy to give a name to that. And so it's important even to give a name to the mechanism. So the important products that we generate from self-diagnosis is to know the mechanism and to give a name to it. In self-confrontation, what we're going to do is to establish the prescriptions of the medicine that we're going to give to solve to that mechanism or that name, that diagnostics we gave ourselves. So what can I do? I function like this, I work like this. What could I do? What prescriptions I could give myself so I can change this mechanism, so it can work in a better and healthier way. So this is the self-prescription phase. And the last phase, the self-overcoming, is the phase that I maybe not 100%. We're never 100% ready, but that I've gone a long way, and I've changed a lot of behaviors, and I changed a lot of my thoughts, the way I think, the way I feel, and my manifestations. The idea is that it got a lot better. Okay, this is the phase, and usually when we do that, we get a lot of energy. We feel good that we don't have that problem anymore, and maybe we're not worried. Something that was worrying or bothering us, that doesn't exist anymore. So the energy that I was spending to focus on that, I'll have all that energy is going to be freed, and the ideal thing to do with that was to take that energy and that's why it's a cycle, and invest in my self-consciential therapy, and begin with a new trait, a new trait, and that I would like to change. Okay, this is the main idea, and this is very important for the subject that we're gonna be speaking about today. Okay, next slide. So this is I've talked about self-consciential therapy. Now I'm gonna talk about bring some things about the other subject that's part of the lecture. That's intraconsciential recycling. I could read this, but the main thing here is that about interconsciential recycling is the idea to generate new synapses or interneuronal connections. For what? So I can be better aligned in my proexis and or my existential recycling, so I can generate new thoughts and things like that. So aiming or having as a goal my evolution. Okay, and I could say to you something that my experience taught me, that is, there is no change in life without an interconsciential recycling. Every change in life needs an interconsciential recycling. Okay, let's go on, and we'll come back to that later. Okay, next slide. Another thing here is the existential recycling. The existential, I'm going to read it to you. The RECEXIS, or the existential recycling, is the technical execution of substantial changes for the better in the intra and extra physical life of the human personality in view of the cosmoethical evolution. Okay, so we can think something like this. The more I do intraconsciential changes, recycling, okay, the more that's gonna reflect, or the more that's gonna propagate in my manifestation as a whole. Okay, so maybe I could give an example. I've seen people that had problem with organizations, even physical organizations like paper. I'm a person that has a lot of paper, and is always trying to rip more and more papers and use more my computer in an organized way. And every time I do some kind of interconsciential recycling in that matter, that I get a bit organized, I focus my process, I develop new routines to get better organized, that not only reflects my interconsciential life, but the things around me. Okay, so what I'm trying to say, and I've already said, that interconsciential recycling is basic for existential recycling. Okay, so next slide. So this is a bit from, it's an emphatic phrase from Professor and Dr. Valdo Vieira, that I think it's very resumes what I'm trying to say. A rigorous interconsciential recycling is a necessary prerequisite for existential recycling. There is no consolidated RECEXIS without an autocritic recin before. This is a very important point. Stop and think about that for a minute or two, okay? If you want to change something, you have to change first inside of you, in your interconsciential world. Okay, next slide. I'm gonna bring some other verbets from Dr. Valdo that I think that are very aligned with this topic, today's topic, okay? One of them is existential sameness that he made, he built this word, or MESMÉXIS. The MESMÉXIS, or existential sameness, is the absence of variety, of progress, of self-performance, of alterability in human life, immobile and unproductive of the regressive concern regarding to evolution. So it's the condition of that person, that consciousness, that doesn't change anything. It's kind of, he was driving a car and took the car to the side of the road, got off the car, and sits on the side of the road and just stays watching the cars go by, and his life is like that. So that's a posture that's very common in interphysical society, and maybe even more in extraphysical society. So it's good for us to question how much of the existential sameness do I live or I manifest in my everyday life. So let's begin thinking about that. Okay, next. This is another verbet that I think has everything to do with this topic, and maybe it's another way to see the consequences. It's a way to see the consequences of the sameness that we just talked about. It's the ancestor of oneself. The ancestor of oneself is the conscious, male or female, who past has not passed, trying to live today, repeating unconsciously, sometimes not even unconsciously, everything already done and surpassed in several previous humans' lives through dispensable, self-mimetic, inconvenient, and counterproductive regarding to consciential evolution itself. So it's imagine someone that lived in a castle, or even and has slaves or something like that, another life, and that still works. In this life, he doesn't have any slave or doesn't live in a castle anymore, but he functions or lives and treats people as if he was still there. He was still in this life. So if you examine your behaviors, everyday behaviors, you could probably see various behaviors that you still act like that. You still act as if you were in another life. You still have a bellicose posture, and it's a very common that many of us have had lives that we were involved in wars or in and in castles and lives, and things like that, had lives like that, and we still treat people with the same type of behaviors. So we're just repeating ourselves lives after lives after lives. So we need a lot of interconsciential recycling. Okay, we need to go back to our evolution. Okay, next slide. This is another thing that's very related here to there's maybe a prescription. It could be a prescription to all of us, the consecutive personality. The idea is here is that you begin to see yourself as a continuation not as something, the same thing every day. So the idea is to put yourself, experiment, uh, continue your relations from where you stopped, trying always to do something better and to have a better manifestation. So the consecutive personality is the guinea pig conscience, which with which we live in the same human life in two stages. The first being short, when the personality, the soma, and the second life when the personality has soma, or has a rebirth. After living a brief intermissive period in the condition of a conscience, restarting the previous interrupt conviviality. So we have to expand the way we look at life, and we have to integrate the idea that we have a life after another in an intermissive period between lives, and that the person next to me, my family, especially my family and my colleagues at work, that we are a group, and that that person that's next to me was probably there for many lives, that I already know him from other lives. So why do I think that it's a new person, and that's something new? I have a new opportunity, but the person next to me, the consciousness next to me, intra or extraphysical, it's probably there it's been there for a long time. So let's not repeat ourselves. Let's look for new experience. Let's look for uh, let's work on these relations. Okay, next slide. So the idea that I want to bring to you is the multi-existential self-relay. Let's read about this. The multi-existential self-relay is the act, process, or effect of the lucid consciousness taking turns with complete self-awareness, so I'm lucid, in the uninterrupted development of evolutionary, advanced, and intentionally intertwined ventures to the maximum between the series of pre-somatic and post-somatic intermissions and intraphysical consecutive continued multi-sacral lives. So, uh, so it's very important that I began to think life as a moment. So this is just another day. This life is just another day in my whole existence. So there's going to be a new day tomorrow, and I've already lived days before. So everything that I can do to expand this notion, like work on my parapsychism, it's very important. It's very important to work on my multidimensional awareness, that I think of everything that's happening today in a multidimensional manner. So if I'm speaking to you here now, it's important for me to pay attention to the energies that's surrounding me now, to the ideas that are coming to my head, to the astrophysical consciousness that are around me, them all my public. So I have to be aware of that all the time. The more I do that, the more I think of the multi existential relay, the more I put myself in movement. And that's for itself, it's an interconsciential recycling. Okay, that's one of the most important things to do. Okay, next. So let's think the recycle this slides, this specific slide. It's I think it's a very important in this presentation. What I want to bring to you here is for us to think about the genesis, or where the recyclings that I've made, that I've passed through in this life, where do they come from? What are their origins? So we can think first of natural self-recyclings inherent to intraphysical life. That's the recyclings that come from here are recyclings because of I've got older. I had cultural influences Uh, but the point here that I want to bring is that most of the time they're kind of natural, they're passive, they're reactive at most. They're not really. I'm not having an active posture. I'm not looking for them. They're simply because I got older and because I was born in a specific culture. Okay. Another type of recyclogenesis here that we could bring is artificial self-recycling stimulated by technological advances, especially at the moment that we're living a pandemic COVID crisis. I think that most of us made some type of recycling. I don't know how profound that would be, but made some kind of recyclings uh, just by using StreamYard, Zoom, and softwares like that to talk to people because you're isolated in some manner or were. I know that some countries are not so isolated now, but here in Brazil we are still very much isolated. So technology, all technologies, not just computers, but the wheel and things like that, they brought some kind of recycling to us, but still mostly reactive or passive recyclings. Okay, there are another type is spontaneous recycling resulting from accumulated self-experience. We know that as we live, we pass through, we live, we have experiences, and that in some way changes us too. But I'm still argumenting here that they're mostly passive or reactive. Okay, the next type is self-recycling induced by adversity. Again, the COVID, the isolation at this moment, it's a very good example. Crisis usually in our lives, maybe we lost a job, some moment of our life, we got separated from a parent or a husband or a wife, and we lost someone we loved, and that could have that's an adversity that maybe got us thinking that we had to change something, but something still had to happen for us to change. So it's still passive and in some matter reactive. Okay. The next would be self-induced recycling by self-awareness about the best. Here we begin to think different. We began to have a more active posture about life. Okay, so we begin to question if is it nice to always to be impatient with everyone? Is it nice to always be complaining about everything? Could I do better? Is it nice to work in this place? Could I have a job that has that can make me happier and that I could contribute better? We begin thinking things like that. So it's more, we are more active. We have a more active posture and we look for things much more than we did before. Another psychogenesis here is advanced recycling derived from the application of new verbs. So imagine something that had a rebirth, and in a certain age you heard something like a projection. You had an out of body experience, or someone told you about out of body experiences, or told you about RECEXIS, an existential program, a mission in life, and that sounded very familiar and very interesting to you, and you began to look for it. You began to look at having more out of your out of body experiences. You began to plan your life. You began to even maybe, I hope, thinking about a multi-existential relay. And then you begin to focus more. As you focus more on that, you begin to change the way you think, the way you act about things in life. Okay, you made better choices based on that. So that's more of an active posture. And another thing is early self recycling driven by evolutophilia. Is the idea that we are in evolution and I want to do my part. I want to be better day after day. And evolution is a fact for me. I've experienced that. I know that that happens. So I'm going to try to do everything I can. I'm going to do every interconsciential recycling I can do to generate more RECEXIS or existential recycling, or is thinking about a cosmoethic evolution. That's the main topic of this lecture that I would invite you to think about. And that's, I hope that can influence your self-research and self-consciential therapy. If you're not recycling, I think you maybe you're on that condition that I talked about earlier, the condition of the MESMÉXIS or the sameness. You stopped you stopped your car at the side of the road and you're just watching life go by. Okay, next. Okay, here and it's another slide that I pretend to spend some time in. Um, the idea is to help you question some postures that you have in everyday life. Try to see in the slide where your manifestations are mainly in. If you manifest yourself more on the left column or the right column. Okay. First thing that I want to bring is, I already talked a little about it, the multidimensional self-awareness. So that's a potentializer of evolution, of interconsciential recycling. Okay, the counterpart of that, the other side of that, is the tropospheric conscience or the robotized conscience. That's that conscience that thinks that there's only this material life, and there is not a multi-dimension, that he hasn't have many lives in the past and he's still going to have a lot of life. There's not an evolution in process, and I'm talking about behaviors and manifestations because I know I know you know other people too, and I even identify many behaviors in my everyday life when I forget about the consciential paradigm, and I began to live as a conscient, just as a intraphysical consciousness. And I go to work, and I have this robotized way of thinking. I look at people as if I never knew them before. I forget to pay attention uh, uh, to my astrophysical life, to everything that's happening, to the astrophysical consciousness, and that the more that I that's a tendency in life. When I go to a bakery or to a restaurant or to work or to find a friend, the uh, the most that happens is that people call me to an interphysical life. They don't tell me, "Oh, did you see that astrophysical consciousness just passed us here? Can you feel this energy now that's happening? Maybe someone's thinking about us. Did you see the consequence of what you're thinking now? Did you see who arrived here? An astrophysical helper? Did you see that the energies that are in this place? We usually are alternating that awareness. So one thing that could potentialize your interconsciential recycling, because you're going to have a more accurate view of everything, is to keep yourself in a multidimensional self-awareness. Okay. Another thing is that we talked about, especially when we talk about the repeatedness of oneself, the ancestor of oneself, is this new line, the conservatism or the a prioropathy that we manifest every day. So are you more of a person that likes new things, new ideas? That have you ever heard? Do you have an object in your house that has an energy of the past? I've heard. I've seen very close friends that have objects or like a gun in their house, and they never thought about they understand a bit about energy. They know there's a multi-dimension, but they weren't completely aware of the consequences of having a gun in their houses. Or maybe you're trying to start a new relationship and you still have the photo of your old relationship or a letter in your house. So, or you have a posture, like you still have a habit that was very common in a past life, that in this life is not it's not good for you anymore. I usually play with my friends, or you say make a joke or something like that. That I say that money, the use of money to pay for things today, is in the future is going to be so absurd as to have slaves in the past. That in the future our relations are going to be based on the consensual needs that we all have and our self-responsibility. So just to bring an actual example. So could you span the slide again, please? And another thing is the way we look at people. Sometimes we look at someone and think we already know how they think and why they're doing things, and we're not empathic. We don't stop and hear them. So to have a consensual openness and to be a bit to have evolutophilia, it's very important for interconsciential recycling. Another thing is the avoidance and concealments we make every day. So it's very common to experience to have bad experience and not to want to feel sadness, and so we end up avoiding that. And avoidance is that's very bad. I usually say that the monster only gets bigger. So the ideal posture is to have a self-confrontation posture. So if it's hurting, if it's not good, it's not generating evolution, I have to stop and look at it, even if it hurts. If it hurts too much, you can seek for help. OIC is here for that. So you can seek external help if you're not able to look at something by yourself. But the ideal posture is not to avoid. Do not avoid. Look for a self-confrontation. And one of the best techniques for self-confrontation is interconsciential recycling. Okay. Another thing is we've been our species is in evolution, and as we go back in our lives, we encounter more of a basic instinct postures. So in the past we lived a lot by we had goals that were pleasure and fear. So we were always looking for something that could hurt us, so we could get far away from it, and looking for pleasure, so we could have things that give us pleasure. Because pleasure would mean that I would survive. Could be food or could be sex, and so I would have sons, I would have descendants, and my species could go on. But we're in a different condition now. We still, of course, we still need pleasure, and we still must be aware for things that could do us harm. But a more precise posture today would be intersistentiality. Like I said, we're in a different moment. It's more productive if we look at people and see how we can help them. If you give them energy and if we help them, probably that's going to come back. That person's going to be happy and that person's going to be thankful. and he's going to give energies back to us. I'm not saying that you have to wait for that, and you shouldn't, but it's a more precise way to work, and I think that's our future. Okay. Another thing here is dispensable existential self-memicity and RECEXIS. We are talked about a lot about that. You know, what I have as a potentializer here is the consensual self-relay or existential, multi-existential self-relay. I'm gonna go to the next because we already talked about that. Another thing here is group karmic interpretation or anti-evolutionary catalysis. Sometimes we have, especially if we think, I could give you examples like food, sex, gambling, drugs. So that those things usually keep us in the past. They do not generate evolution, and they keep us together with groups of the past, or maybe not the past. If you still think that if those things are still a value for you, so and that's going to keep us together, right? When you drink, I know, I think you probably know that when you drink, usually you're not, or you smoke, usually you're not alone. You're not. You might be interphysically alone, but extraphysically, there are probably consciousness that cannot hold a cigarette or cannot drink by themselves, and they still need that type of energy. So they're going to look for someone that drinks or smokes, just to give an example, or eats. They don't need that anymore, but they still have that habit, and they still and they're gonna go get next to people that have that as a bad habit. So that's not good. Okay, for the ideal posture here, the potentializer is to be a mini piece of a max mechanism, and to that would be an evolutionary catalyst that would make you go faster in evolution. To be a mini piece of a maxi mechanism is a very interesting thing to think about. The idea is that you're not the whole mechanism, and that you're in a group that's working. It has the aim of the goal of having something that's more that generates more evolution to everybody, and you're working with that group to make that mechanism work, and you're a very important piece of that. And the good thing is that being a mini piece of that maxi mechanisms, you're gonna not suffer, but you're gonna have all the advantages of the maxi mechanisms. As the mechanism grows, as it gets large and expands, it works better, and you're gonna be one of the user of this mechanisms. Okay. Another thing here is the law of least effort and the law of the greatest effort. Usually, we don't want to spend. Again, this has something to do with even the species. We don't want to spend much energy. We want to stay seated. We don't want to change anything. But I don't know. I think you already know that doesn't work for long. That doesn't mean that sometimes you don't have to sit, or it wouldn't be good for you to relax, sit, watch a film or thing like that. But evolution, there's no shortcuts. The only way to get in evolution, to recycle, is to use the law of the greatest effort. You're gonna have to spend energy to do that, because you're developing a new habit. It's not you have to change an old habit, a habit that probably has been there for lives, and now you see that's not good anymore for you, and you have to do something in a different way. The old habit, you did it unconsciously. Now, to develop the new habit, you have to be watching yourself. You have to use your lucidity, and you have to do it consciously till it becomes a new habit. So there's a lot of energy to be spent there. Okay. Another thing here is to uh, give up the posture of to be a victim of everything. There's a very common posture that people have done this to us, to complain, complain, and complain. And we usually say that either you're that everyone that's a victim was or is an aggressor in other circumstances or in other lives. So we are inviting you to change that posture for a more productive posture to be self-unforgiving and hetero-forgiving. What does that mean? Just to try to be precise. It's not that to be self-unforgiving doesn't mean that I have to carry guilt or something like that, but I have to be responsible. I have to see what I've done that was not good, and I can't forget that. I have to use that as an example to do it better. That's to be responsible. So it's not a guilty thing. It's not to feel guilt all the time. Just to look at it, oh, I've done this, it wasn't good, I have to do it better. And the way to do it better is this way, is to do self-confrontations all the time and not to avoid things. That's to be self-unforgiving. And hetero-forgiving is the condition that I look at the person and see it as a conscious in evolution too. So like me, that person is in evolution, and maybe he's done something that's not mature now. It's not doing something mature, but I have to understand he's an evolution. And that too doesn't mean that I have to accept everything and let that person continue like that. I could give limits, I could establish limits to that person. But the ideal posture is to understand, not to be impatient, not to be violent, not to be aggressive with that person. Okay? That's to be hetero-forgiving. That's a more optimized posture. Okay? Another thing here is to have priorities. I could ask you, what are your priorities? What are your values? Do you have values? Are they clear to you? Do you know on the past month everything that you did and why did you do it? What were your values then? Most, if you have the sameness posture, probably you're not thinking about that. Okay, so it's an optimization, a potentializer. If you start thinking and even write down a code of personal priorities. One more thing here is to use your evolutionary intelligence and not your abdominal subbrain, or that has something to do with what I said before about using your basic instincts for everything. Try to use more of your mental soma, okay? Another thing, the last one here, is absolute truth versus verpons. So we know the state, there's something called state of art, or the things are evolution always brings new truth, new things that are better. That's something that was very good in the past may not be so good now. So think about that, okay? Next slide. Here are some implications that are very obvious. I could write a list of 500,000, 5,000 good implications, the advantages of thinking like that, of making interconsciential recycling. I just going to leave the slide here. It's going to be recorded. This presentation is going to be, lecture is going to be recorded. You can look at it in more details. But just have you ever thought that you're about motivation, work, and leisure? That could be, that those things could be work together. You could have a better job. That job could be very pleasing. Could be very, you could be very motivated, and that to go to work and to work could be very good. Could make you very happy, and you can feel the presence of others, and you feel yourself helping everyone. Have you ever thought that could be possible? That's looks as that's something that's not always obvious to everyone, and that you could have that could have a lot of well-being, that energetically you could always be, things around you could always be good. You could always feel that it's not a dumb happiness, but you could feel that everything's all right. That this crisis that's coming now is a good opportunity for me to learn. You can have a posture like that, and probably if when you start working like that, you have astrophysical helpers that need people like that to be part of the max mechanism. They will want you as a mini piece, and you can contribute with that. And then tomorrow, maybe you'll be the astrophysical helper. Okay, next slide. Okay, I'm just gonna give you talk about some tips and some techniques in the phases of the self-consciential therapy cycle. Okay, the first of all is the self-investigation that I already told you. That is the phase where we gather all the facts that we have in the para-facts or astrophysical facts that we have to start investigating about that thing that's bothering us. So one thing I already said was, what do you want to change or qualify? Identify that. Give it a name. Try to give it a name. I'm very angry person, and that's bringing me bad consequences in my relations and even into my body. That could be an example. So anger, that could be the thing you want to change. And there's a very good technique that's in our site. That's that's a new word for me, malaise investigation technique. The idea is that every time I feel anger, I put that in a diary, in a paper, and try to gather facts. And so after a certain number of facts, I'll get a better notion of what's happening to me. Okay. Another thing, if you don't have you're having difficulty to know exactly what of you want to work, or what's the exact priority, I like this technique. I've used some many times already. I request a list of strong traits and weak traits from my acquaintances, my friends. Not only my friends, but the people I know. Sometimes a friend's not going to tell you everything, or even because he has a good relation with you. But maybe that colleague, that person that works in the same project with you, in the same job with you, that's not a friend, but it's someone that's spends 8 hours, 10 hours with you every day. Maybe he could give you some good details about the way you manifest yourself, the way you act in everyday life, and you probably gonna have. Yeah, I usually ask that for about 10 people, 10 to 20, and I always can see what's my priorities, the things I have to. I look at myself. I have some information. When I manifest myself, I put that on paper. And then when I ask my friends or my colleagues or the people I encounter every day, when I put these two together, I usually have a clearer view of my priorities, or the things I have to investigate. Okay. The next phase or the next step would be the self-diagnosis. When I put all these facts together, as I said before, I'll probably have a good notion of how I work, of my mechanisms. So try to give it a name to that. What's the name of your diagnosis? What name would you give to that? Okay, when we have a name, we make a definition. It's as if we position ourselves. I suffer this. I have this question that I have to solve. Okay, that's very good. That's very therapeutic. A good technique here to help amplify the mechanisms is an allosomatic checkup technique. That's the idea that along the day, and especially when I am manifesting that trait that I want to work in, try to stop, see what your body is telling you, see what your energies, your chakras, what ones are active, what ones are blocked, how's your energy. Try to think what emotions are you feeling. Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you missing someone? Are you happy? What are the feelings that you're feeling at that moment? What are the emotions? Name them. Most of the people do not have an emotion dictionary in their head. There, we have to develop that. Um, and what are the thoughts that I am having now that are making me feel this and making me act that way? So autosomatic checkup technique is a very good technique. And I in this phase I would like to ask you to be aware of the self-diagnostic banalization syndrome. That's a verbete that was written by a consciential therapist called Marco Almeida here from OIC. It's a very good one. I recommend that you try to have someone translate it for you, or to talk to you about that. But the main idea is that sometimes, as a way to avoid the things we have to work, we always think the diagnosis is never ready, or we start to work like as if we love diagnosis. Oh, look at how I'm angry. Look at how I work. I keep telling people that. I keep justifying my postures, and I don't change anything. So beware of the syndrome of the self-diagnostic banalization syndrome. Okay, next slide. And self-confrontations, when I give myself a prescriptions. So the first thing I want to tell you about is the principle personal positioning. So here is the moment I say, I have this, I have to work on this, I have to give myself prescriptions. That's very important. If you don't do that, probably you're not going to advance. You're going to stay on the steps uh, back, and you're not going to be working. I have to be conscious that I'm trying to get to a new level. So that's going to make I'm gonna have to develop new habits, health routines, and I have to have priorities. I'm going to give you 3 techniques that you can look at it in our site. Our site is in English now, so you can look at it there. So there's these 3 techniques: action by the priorities technique, action by the little things technique, and the perception of self-justification techniques. The first one focuses the prescriptions I'm going to give myself are based on the priority. What's more important to act first in? The second technique, the technique of little things, is that especially for those people that like to do great things, big things, and always get lost on that. It's usually better to begin with little steps, little things. Act on little things, then go to the next thing, then to the next thing, and day after day. Okay, that's another technique. And the perception of the self-sufficient technique is a kind of a vaccine. It's that you give yourself. So when you perceive that when you get aware that you're giving a justification not to do something, that you're explaining too much, to stop and think, why am I explaining so much? That probably is a mechanism that you're of avoidance. So that's a good technique. And the last step here, the self overcoming. It's the idea here is to have clear parameters, indicators that you can look at it. So in the past, I would get angry or impatient 10 times a day. Now I'm only getting angry 2 times. Or I used to spend 24 hours, 3 days, 1 week angry. Now that's not happening anymore. I'm only angry about an hour or 2. So we have to have clear parameters, okay? You have to adjust. Another important thing is to say that you have to make adjustment. It's not because you gave yourself prescriptions. They're going to be accurate, and they're going to work. Sometimes we have to give new prescriptions and throw away past prescriptions because they're not working. They're not tailor-made for us, okay? Another thing is, every self-overcoming is relative. So you're going to be taking steps for a better life, through in any evolution. But sometimes we give 2-3 steps forward, and we give a back step. We give a step back. So think that you already know what you have to do, and you already know what to do when you give a step back. Okay, so self-overcoming is relative, and try to make that doesn't have to suffer. Pleasant interconsciential recycling. You don't have to suffer when you're doing interconsciential recycling. That is possible, and there is an verbet that talks about that. Okay, next. So to conclude, we are reaching 12 o'clock. I would like to leave some things for you to think. First of all, how many constructive changes have you occurred to me or to you in the past year, or even in this pandemic crisis that we're living? Did it change anything? And another question, of what type, if you consider the recyclogenesis, of what type was that change, that recycling? Was it natural? Were you passive? Were you reactive? Or did you get all this time to stay at home and thought of good things you could do and started doing it? Okay. Also think about the technique of continual education. Think that you're going to start to do interconsciential recycling. That's never going to stop. That's a dynamic way of living. Okay. Another thing, the more lucid the conscience is, the more frequent are the multiple recycling self-manifestations. That's just something related to what I just said. So life evolution is dynamic. Okay? If your life is very calm, create healthy problems. Maybe everything's all right. I have my salary, I have my food, I have my love, I have my books. If everything's, beware, if everything's very calm, try to generate some crisis for you. I hope that you have many crises. That's something I hope for you. Next slide. I would like to tell you that we already have a lot of English books in English that you can reach and you can access in the Editares. They're even for free, so you can get there in Editares and get some downloads. And there are some of the books that are in Amazon too. There are 2 links there that you can look calmly after this lecture, because it's going to be recorded in YouTube and in our Facebook. Okay, next slide. Like to tell you that we have self-conscientiotherapic consultations. We have in 2 modalities. We have regular, it's weekly based, and you have punctual if you just want to talk about a specific thing and you're not going to be needing weekly consultations. Okay, feel free, get in our sites and subscribe if you need it. Okay, next. I'd like to invite you to an activity that we're going to have next week. It's a group self-conscientiotherapeutics applied to self-intrusion. It's a very good experience. I really like to invite you to that, because it's very productive when we start talking about our questions and other people have some experience to share with us, or even have the same crisis that we are passing at that moment. So it's very productive, can be very productive. Okay, I invite you to all to that. And I think it's our last slide. I would like to tell you that we've just launched our English website. Is that address that it's there? It's conscientiotherapy.org. So all of our sites, we have books, we have articles there, and have lots of information. So access the site. Everything was translated to English. So we have our sites. Our sites now is in English and Portuguese. There's a lot of interesting materials, even in English. In video, we have legends at the bottom of the videos, and we're going to start producing more and more video in English like this lecture. Okay, I think that was the last slide. Is that it? Ok, então, thank you for listening to me. I hope my English wasn't very bad, and I promise to study more and to practice more, so my next lecture, my next course, it will be better, okay? Have a nice day, and lots of crisis and self-consciential therapy to you all. Goodbye.